If you can conceive of a world without America, without everything America stands for and everything it does in the world, and you've already taken great strides and begun to get at least a glimpse of a whole new world. If you can envision a world without any imperialism, exploitation, oppression, and the whole philosophy that rationalizes it, a world without division into classes or even different nations and all the narrow-minded, selfish, outmoded ideas that uphold this. If you can envision all this, then you have the basis for proletarian internationalism. And once you have raised your sights to all this, how could you not feel compelled to take an active part in the world's historic struggle to realize it? Why would you want to lower your sights to anything less? Bob Avakian.
The heavens above, see it as it is, see it as it is. No borders or banks, no walls or tanks, no nations, no nations. I got my dreams when I sleep, and I got these dreams that really could be.
You are watching the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. I want to welcome all of our new and returning viewers to our 10th episode, May 28th, 2020. My name is Andy Z, and I'm the host of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, and we take our name from the film of a talk by Bob Avakian in 2013. BA Speaks, Revolution Nothing Less. This is a must-see. The filmmaker said, yes, this is a film, but that is not its essence. This is a daring, substantive, scientific summoning to revolution. 6+ hours that can change how you see the world and what you do with the rest of your life. Is this hype? No. That's real. So stick with us today and find out why. Take the journey with us today through this episode, today and every week, and you will come to see that Bob Avakian is a different kind of leader. Not some bourgeois politician or wannabe bourgeois politician who is trying to keep this capitalist, imperialist system going, oppressing and exploiting people here and around the world. Not someone who's lamenting the problems we face today and proposing a few changes that might help a few people for a little bit of time, but leaving the world the horror it is for the masses of people of the world. No, that's not Bob Avakian, that's not BA. He is completely different. He has worked on and developed a way for humanity to go to work on and to solve the problems that most other leaders and even scholars haven't even thought of yet. BA proceeds from, and he takes us to the reality that humanity here and around the world lives. He confronts it unvarnished, but not just on the surface, but he digs down to the roots. And that's what it means to be radical. Radical is not a pose, it's not a style of life, it's going to the roots, and it's finding the ways and the means to dig them up, which is what you need to do if you face and confront a poisonous weed. And this system is nothing if not a killing machine, robbing people of their very lives through massive and murderous wars, environmental devastation, and what's often hidden and is yet every day, the killing way this capitalist imperialist system functions, sucking the blood from the people here and around the world in a relentless drive for profit. It's as poisonous as it is unnecessary. More, what is utterly unique in today's world is that Bob Avakian has developed a way out of this life-stealing madness, a strategy to build up the understanding and the forces for an actual revolution to overthrow this system. And he has written a concrete blueprint for a radically new society and government where we, the masses of people of all nationalities, could go to work to overcome all the division, all forms of oppression and exploitation, and all the backward ideas that keep people thinking in that me-first, dog-eat-dog way of this system, blinding people to the world that, quote, really could be, as it was put in the song, Fighting Song, by the band International that began today's episode of the RNL show. Today we're going to dig into one big question that can be summed up by the quotation from Bob Avakian in the Handbook for Revolution, Basics from the Talks and Writings of Bob Avakian. And look, on the back it says, you can't change the world if you don't know the basics. And Basics 5:8, which means Chapter 5, quotation number 8, is this: internationalism. The whole world comes first, end quote. Not me, not my people, not my country, but the whole world. That's not only a profoundly moral and inspiring statement, internationalism, the whole world comes first, but there's a whole lot of science packed into the moral stand of that statement, a deep understanding that what is happening in the world as a whole, the global functioning of the capitalist economies on a world scale, which we call imperialism, and the politics that corresponds to that, more determines what is happening within any given country than even what is going on in that particular country, as important as that is to making revolution. And this is true after the revolution as well. What's packed into that statement will be brought alive through today's program, with the hope and the purpose that you, our new and our returning viewers, will be provoked to get deeper into Bob Avakian's work on this and every other question, that you will go to the website revcom.us to find out about it, and that you'll watch the film B.A. Speaks Revolution Nothing Less, which we're going to put a link to right on the RevCom's YouTube page. And while I have Basics open here, that was Basics 5.8, which means Chapter 5, 8th quote. I'm going to read the quote that comes before. Quote, American lives are not more important than other people's lives, end quote. Think about that. This is a hallmark of Bob Avakian's work, that the revolution we need, the revolution we are working towards, is for the emancipation of humanity. That's really what communism is all about and what it's for. So while I have my book out here and I'm on a riff of what you've got in Basics, I want you to check this quote out. The beginning of Chapter 2. Communism, a whole new world, and the emancipation of all of humanity. Not the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. That's the exact opposite of USA, USA, we're number one, MAGA, make America great again. This bullshit from that depraved lunatic President Donald Trump, whose lunacy is the lunacy of fascism, and who now commands not only a fascist regime with that Christian fascist theocrat Mike Pence at his side and the fascist Republican Party and his MAGA hat-wearing Confederate flag-waving followers, but let us not forget that Trump commands the most powerful country in the world with the largest nuclear arsenal in the history of the world. But this is also the direct opposite of what the Democrats say. America's already great, and telling you to vote for them to return to the greatness before Trump. Well, stay tuned today, because we're going to have some fun, and it's going to be some serious fun, to ripping the mask off of both of these deceitful and outmoded nostrums and what they have meant for lives here and around the world. So stick with us today. We're going to do our best to help you wipe the fog from your glasses and from your eyes and join the great struggle to free humanity from this system and rule of this system and its enforcers. This is the fight that we prepare for. This is what we invite you to be a part of. So I want to just recall the words of the song we played at the beginning of this show that said, all of our people, all across the world, they want something more. Look down on our planet from the heavens above. See it as it is, see it as it is. No borders or banks, no wars or tanks, no nations, no nations. I've got my dreams when I sleep, and I've got these dreams that really could be. That's Fighting Song from the band International. You can find it on Bandcamp and Spotify and other places, and we thank them for their permission to use it. But importantly, to conclude the introduction to today's RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, I want to return to the words of Bob Avakian that began this episode. Words that if you think about them, if you let them be a gateway to understanding what holds humanity back, words that are an invitation to you, an invitation that opens up the whole world. These words, too, are in Basics, Basics 131. And I quote again the words that began our show. If you can conceive of a world without America, without everything America stands for and everything it does in the world, then you've already taken great strides and begun to get at least a glimpse of a whole new world. If you can envision a world without any imperialism, exploitation, oppression, and the whole philosophy that rationalizes it, a world without division into different nations, and all the narrow-minded, selfish, outmoded ideas that uphold this. If you can envision all this, then you have the basis for proletarian internationalism. And once you have raised your sights to this, how could you not feel compelled to take an active part in the world historic struggle to realize it? And why would you want to lower your sights to anything less? Bob Avakian, Basics 131. So I'm here with Luan, my friend and frequent contributor to the show. Luan's a member of the Revolution Club, and so I want to say hi, and also you can take us into the next segment of the show. How you doing today?
I'm all right, and like you said, the last point that you're making about the future, we are fighting and living by the future today, and I want to draw people to the points of attention for the Revolution Club, which you can find at revcom.us. There's 6 points, and before we go, we want to turn this over to our folks at BNN News Network.
Hi, this is Chantel Verdad, your substitute anchor this week on BNN's The World is Your Oyster. This is my first time here on Bougie News Network, and I'm looking forward to introducing our correspondent, Brian McCullough. Brian, what do you have for us this week?
Well, Chantel, we always remind our viewers, as Americans, they have the right to go all over the world and have the local people entertain them at their every whim without ever being disturbed. Let's spin the globe. Our first stop, Vietnam, where quaint temples meet a country that is pulling out of poverty with the help of American companies such as Nike.
Wait 1 second, Brian. I was reading on revcom.us, and let me pull it up on my phone here, that American Crime Case 96 says that on March 16th, 1968, over a period of just 4 hours, members of the Charlie Company methodically slaughtered more than 500 unarmed victims, killing some in ones and twos, often others in small groups, and collecting many more in a drainage ditch before murdering them. It says they faced no opposition. They even took a quiet break to eat lunch in the midst of all the carnage. Along the way, they also raped women and young girls, mutilated the dead, systematically burned homes, and fouled the area's drinking water. It goes on. Those who exposed this crime were threatened, and of those who carried it out, nobody spent more than 2 days in jail for it. This was just one day in a 15-year war in which America killed 3 million people.
Yes, well, let's spin the globe, shall we? Our next destination is lovely Indonesia. Be sure to get here while some of the rare orangutans are still surviving before the American palm oil companies rip up the rest of their habitat. And when you're here, don't miss the tasty dishes
Well,
Prepared
Brian,
locally.
it seems every time we spin this globe, we're going to come across another American crime. Revcom.us says, for American Crime Case 100, that in 1965, Americans backed a coup by the Indonesian general Suharto. The new regime slaughtered at least 500,000 people, perhaps even 1 million, including members of the Communist Party of Indonesia, trade unionists, intellectuals, educators, teachers, land reform advocates, ordinary peasants, ethnic Chinese women and children. I mean, this was a massacre. And hundreds of thousands more were arrested and tortured. Oh my God. Then the US provided the regime with equipment, weapons, and ultimately tens of billions of dollars. CIA advisors counseled the Indonesian generals, and top U.S. embassy officials compiled and approved a list of those who might oppose the new regime. And this hit list, with 5,000 names, was just handed over to the Indonesian military. Then, during the slaughter, U.S. advisors coldly calculated and assessed the progress.
Yes, well, I'm sure that was unfortunate. But if you're going to keep bringing these things up and interrupting me, you're going to disturb the sleep of our viewers. Now shut up and don't interrupt and let me finish my segment. Let's spin the globe, shall we? Next, for the more adventurous traveler, Iraq and the ancient and fascinating city of Fallujah. In this city,
I've had about enough of this American chauvinism that you're shoving down people's throats. You shut up and listen. When we talk about Iraq, I was part of the U.S. death machine in Iraq. I served in their military. So let's talk about what happened in Fallujah in 2004 when America decided they were going to send them back to the Stone Age. They surrounded that town, cut off the water, cut off the power, and then a population of over 250,000 people had nowhere to go. So what did the military do? They rained down their hell from above. Hundreds of rockets, bombs, and missiles, thousands of artillery rounds, hundreds of thousands of machine gun rounds. Let's talk about what some of these rounds are made out of. Depleted uranium, which to this day is still causing birth defects. Or let's talk about the white phosphorus that the U.S. used, that the rest of the international community doesn't use because it's banned by international law. Or we can talk about the cluster bombs, which I can personally attest to don't discriminate between civilians and combatants. Just like the U.S. military, huh? You know what? If more people want to know about what happens when America goes around the world with its sense of entitlement, they can read about American Crime number 94 on revcom.us. But for now, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Chantal. You, go back to the cave you came from.
Bob Avakian has said, in order for there to be real and lasting change for the better, people have to fully confront the actual history of this country and the role it plays in the world up to today, and the terrible consequences of this. To get into this truth, go to revcom.us and dig into the American Crime series found there.
So that was the Bougie News Network, and the last bit of that was not acting. It was the reality. And we think that we're going to be seeing that group, that crew, a lot more on the show. So, Andy, where do we want to go next?
Well, I just want to say I may agree with you, that was a very heavy segment, and that's just two things. That was the reality in that last segment. Bo actually was in Fallujah. That's really him, and he's somebody who came from one point of view when he went in and came out thinking about this differently. So that's really important, and you can learn more about and see the rest of this American crime series at revcom.us. But for our next segment, we're going to get right back into the theme and continue the theme of this show with a segment from the film that I was speaking about earlier, B.A. Speaks, Revolution, Nothing Less, the talk that Bob Avakian gave in 2013. It's a 3-disc DVD that you can purchase from Revolution Books online. You can get it online at revcom.us, and you can even watch the film and Q&As from it online as well at revcom.us. And the segment we're going to watch is a very concise but important segment on internationalism. The whole world comes first. Let's go.
So in opposition to the America First chauvinism that is endlessly promoted in this country under this system, and was again openly promoted by Obama in his recent victory speech, what we have to base ourselves on and proceed from is internationalism. Again, go back to the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic in North America, draft proposal, and compare it on the question of the country and the relation to the rest of the world with the U.S. Constitution. We have to proceed on internationalism. The whole world comes first, and the goal is the emancipation of all humanity, not the strengthening of our country to be the most powerful country in the world. The building of a powerful movement for revolution in this country, even before things get to the point of all-out revolution, can and should draw great inspiration and important lessons from people rising up in other parts of the world. At the same time, the more a movement for revolution is built in this country, with communist forces and a communist understanding and outlook increasingly becoming its leading core, this will have a tremendous impact, not only in this country, but throughout the world, on oppressed people and people yearning for a better world everywhere. It will change the whole equation, challenging and transforming how people throughout the world who learn of this think about and see the possibilities of radical change. We should understand the dialectical relation, or another way to say that, the back and forth impact and influence between building for and then, when the conditions are ripe, carrying out the all-out struggle for revolution in this country, and the development of the revolutionary struggle with a growing core committed to the cause of communism in other countries throughout the world. I think about an experience I had when I was forced into exile in France in the early 1980s. I met someone from Asia who was themselves revolutionary minded. And one of the first things they said to me was, what's happening with black people in America? What's happening with their struggle? Have the imperialists been able to repress and contain them? It seems like they're not rising up the way they were before. And I said, well, maybe temporarily, but don't be too sure. This is the kind of impact that struggles in different countries can have, and let's face it. You want to talk about everybody knows? Here's an everybody knows it's true. Everybody knows that one of the hardest places in the entire world to make revolution is this country. And everybody knows that if there were a real revolution in this country, it would change the entire world and inspire people all over the world and change their way of looking at things in the world in a truly profound and radical way. I think about the common. You can learn from everybody, even from the people on the other side of the struggle. There was this British commentator talking about the Islamic fundamentalists in places like Britain and in the world in general, denouncing them as terrorists, which many of them actually do carry out terrorism. And what we are about has nothing to do with it and is completely opposed to what they're about. But he made a very interesting comment, which he said a generation or two ago, these people would have been Maoists, communists. We should think deeply about that. You see, what he was saying is in a different world, when there was a socialist country in China, when there was a Cultural Revolution, when it stood for revolution and radiated revolution to the world and supported revolution around the world, that was a tremendous magnet of attraction for people. There's a lot of truth to that. Now, as I said, our objectives, our philosophy, our methods, our tactics, our goals, everything are completely and radically and fundamentally opposed, different from and opposed to Islamic fundamentalists, especially those who carry out terrorism, even targeting the people. But there's something important to learn here. It has something to say about what it will mean if a movement for revolution, even before we get to the point of all-out revolution, will have in influencing people all over the world. This is part of our internationalist responsibilities, but it's also something that we can play a big role in affecting. But as important as all that is, it is still not enough. We have to not only fight the power and transform the people, and yes, have a powerful impact on people and forces throughout the world while also learning from them, but we have to go on, and when the time is right, fight to actually win, to actually do what all this is for, making revolution and making even greater contributions to this revolution throughout the world.
So that was Bob Avakian from the film BA Speaks, Revolution Nothing Less. As I said, you can find that on revcom.us. You can also order the DVD, which comes in 3 discs with chapters, as I said, from Revolution Books online and also through RCP Publications online. Our next segment is a short illustration of an article that was on revcom.us. It's called From Vice Grip to Death Grip, Imperialist Domination, COVID-19, and the Poor of the World Be Damned by Raymond Latta. So let's go to that right now.
We live under the system of capitalism imperialism. It is a worldwide system driven by profit and the competitive struggle for more profit. It is a system based on the exploitation of hundreds upon hundreds of millions worldwide, and the whole world economy rests on, America's wealth rests on, vast networks of sweatshops. A handful of rich capitalist countries like the US, France, Russia, and China plunder the planet. They contend with each other for power, for influence and control over markets and regions. They dominate the economies of the poor countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. They drain wealth and resources from these oppressed countries. They make loans that tighten their grip over them. Under this system of capitalism imperialism, advanced technology and scientific and medical resources are concentrated in the rich capitalist imperialist countries. This is what Bob Avakian has called the lopsidedness of the world. All of this distorts the economic and social development of the oppressed countries and leads to tremendous human suffering. And the US is at the top of the feeding chain. The accounts that follow illustrate different ways in which the COVID-19 pandemic is being experienced in oppressed countries like Mexico and Bangladesh. Exhibit number 1. U.S. Ambassador to Mexico issues threat to the Mexican government. Keep the factories producing for U.S. corporations running, or we might take these jobs elsewhere. Close to the U.S. border in Mexico, U.S.-owned and subcontracted factories employ hundreds of thousands of Mexican workers. They produce computer, airplane, and car parts, televisions, and other electrical appliances, overwhelmingly for the U.S. market. Wages of workers average 1/9 the manufacturing wages in the U.S., and labor and environmental protections are minimal. With outbreaks of the coronavirus erupting in these and other factories, with workers falling ill and dying on the job, and with testing for the virus scarce, the Mexican Health Ministry ordered plant closings. But the U.S. ambassador insisted that these plants remain open. Why? It was not because these factories are producing goods or carrying out services essential to the welfare of the Mexican people. Most of the output is exported. But that output has been deemed by the US government as essential to the United States. Come again? TVs, Sharpie pens, aircraft engines for a US airline industry that is severely curtailing operations? There's a dirty little secret. The profitability of imperialist supply chains depends on the continuing humming of global assembly lines. The strategic capacities of the US military, its death machine, and security apparatus requires an assured inflow of components. And the competitive strength of US capital depends on reliable, low-cost, efficient production. Listen to Mariana, a worker in a US-owned motor factory in Juarez, explaining what she and others have been facing. Someone who worked very close to us had a high temperature, and they sent him home. 6 days later, he died. And now others have high temperatures. There isn't much distance between us on the assembly line. And if a machine breaks, they put us all on the same one, right on top of each other. Listen to a welder at a factory producing parts for Boeing. They exposed us to this contagious virus. For them, delivery of their products is more important than our health. The New York Times described the ultimatum from the US ambassador to Mexico to reopen factories as an example of America's unequal relationship with Mexico. We can be more precise. This is brute neocolonialism. And keep this fact in mind. The majority of people infected with COVID-19 in late April were factory workers. And these factories have been major transmission belts for the virus that is now battering all of Mexico. This is the world we live in. These horrors and inequalities are built in to the very nature and functioning of the system of capitalism, imperialism we live under. With the COVID-19 pandemic, this suffering has intensified and will intensify further. As Bob Avakian has put it, we have two choices: either live with all this and condemn future generations to the same or worse if they have a future at all, or make revolution.
Next, we have a very important interview that's going to deepen a good deal of what we've been talking about all day, and particularly getting into the Constitution for a New Socialist Republic. My colleague, my co-host, Sansara Taylor, is going to be interviewing Lenny Wolf, who is a leader of the movement for an actual revolution.
I'm happy to have here in the studio with us today Lenny Wolf, who is a follower of Bob Avakian, a longtime revolutionary and one of the leaders of the National Get Organized for an Actual Revolution tour. Lenny, welcome to the Revolution Nothing Less show.
Sansara, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be on a show that's doing such important work right now. And it's begun and it's got a great future, and let's all get together and really make it everything it can be.
All right, well, we're glad you're here to help us do that. You know, earlier in this episode, we showed an excerpt from Bob Avakian about internationalism from the speech, Revolution Nothing Less. And in the opening of that excerpt that we showed, he said, you know, compare the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America, the Constitution he authored, to what we have today. And I thought for this segment, we really want to actually open up this Constitution, look at what it opens up for humanity. So I want to just set the stage. I'm going to read a little bit, and then I have a number of questions that I'm hoping you'll take us through, Lenny. So that everybody's clear, a revolution is the overthrow, the defeat and dismantling of the ruling authorities of this existing system. It's cleared away. So this Constitution is a framework and a blueprint for a radically new society, economy, laws, structure, culture, a whole different way. And right in the beginning, on page 2 of the preamble, it makes this very important point as a foundation for the whole society. It brings alive the basics quote that Andy mentioned earlier, internationalism, the whole world comes first. And it says, the orientation and principles of this state, as embodied in this Constitution, are internationalist. While giving due emphasis to meeting the material, intellectual, and cultural needs of the people within this state on a continually expanding basis, and to promoting the further transformation of society to continue uprooting social inequalities and remaining aspects of exploitation and oppression, the socialist state must fundamentally give priority to the advance of the revolutionary struggle and the final goal of communism throughout the world, and must adopt and carry out policies and actions which are in accordance with and give concrete effect to this internationalist orientation. So I know that's a big thing to open with, but I just want to have you speak about what does this mean concretely?
I think the key phrase in there is give fundamental priority to the advance of the whole world revolution. And I think you can, and that is an application of the whole world comes first. And you're applying that all the way through the period that you're building up to the revolution. You're not making a revolution in the heartland of empire merely to free the heartland itself. You want to bring down this whole empire that's sitting on humanity like a vulture or like a vampire sucking its blood. And that has implications for how we build up the movement now, why we train people to welcome the defeats of their own imperialists when those imperialists get into conflicts, how we challenge people on their feelings for America that have been drummed into them from the time they're born. And this will come out as well, as B.A. talks about in the clip we showed today, in the actual moment of the revolution, in the build-up to the revolution, and then in the revolution itself. When you make revolution in this country with that stand, it's going to have a very powerful effect all over the world. Think of the effect in Mexico. Think of the effect of people in Mexico rising up back on this country. We've got to have the whole world in our sights all the time from now until the end. And this is going to be tricky. It's going to pose contradictions at different points. That's something that's addressed in the Constitution. It's something that you can read about at revcom.us. But, and maybe we'll get to it today, but all that's bound up. Those are just some of the dimensions bound up in that quote you read, both from Basics and the quote from the Constitution.
Okay, so to carve into this a little bit more, let's talk about, right now the U.S. has military bases all over the world. It's a history and a legacy of occupations, invasions, war crimes. What happens to all of this?
In brief, it all gets dismantled. There's 800, almost 800 military bases projecting U.S. power and domination around the world. These are in other countries, not the U.S. There's a total for the next 3 highest countries put together of 30 bases. All these are no more. All these are gone, as is the whole apparatus that's been used under Republicans and, yes, under Democrats, if not more so under Democrats, to terrorize and carry out unthinkable and untold horrors all around the world. Vietnam, Korea, up to Iraq. All this is no more. That's the very first thing.
What about nukes?
There will be the socialist state will go about dismantling the nuclear weapons that the U.S. has, which is by far the largest total of nuclear weapons in the world. The new state will safely dismantle, and figure out how to decommission these nuclear weapons, because we have no use for a weapon that is designed to kill and terrorize civilians.
Okay, so what changes in the economy?
Well, let me begin that answer by reading from the Article 4, Section 9, page 87, which deals with the international dimension of what changes in the economy. Of course, there's going to be tremendous changes all through the economy. This Constitution goes deeply into that, but it also goes into the international dimension in quite some detail. I want to read one section of that, Article 4, Section 9 in the Constitution. The structure of production and the resource base of the socialist economy cannot depend on labor and materials from other countries, much less exploitation and domination. The development of a socialist economy must not involve the export of capital. For example, building factories or making loans for profit. A socialist economy must not reproduce relations of domination and inequality in its international relations. This question, too, must be put before the masses of people as part of their coming to more deeply understand and to act on the basic principles on which the new socialist republic in North America is founded and according to which it must proceed. On day one, we'll begin moving to dismantle international supply chains that have sucked the blood of the people of the world as part of reorienting the entire socialist economy. It's going to be a whole different thing. We're not just taking over things as they are. We're reorienting economy in line with the original quote you read, and also another important part of that, as well as meeting the material needs of the people and supporting revolution around the world, will also be repairing the environment. All these are going to enter into things. But this international dimension is really critical.
Okay, so two questions. What does that mean concretely for people around the world? Dismantling supply chains. I just want you to, that's a very sanitized term. It's a real term, but it masks sort of what that means.
The oil companies that suck the blood and in the form of petroleum out of the ground and pollute things. The mineral mining concessions, quote unquote, in Africa that enslave children. The sweatshops in Bangladesh and Pakistan, in Haiti, that grind up the lives of young women and, yes, child labor. All that's done, okay? That's no more day one.
Okay, Lenny. What you're describing, though, the implications of it are that people won't have as much stuff in this country. Their standard of living is going to go down.
In the immediate sense, and in a basic sense, yes, that's true. There will not be the endless stream of gadgets, of what are little more than toys, of what are things, the stuff that's based, stuff, as you said, that's based on what's been sucked out of the blood of the people of the world. At the same time, there will be something very different. First of all, there'll be a society that is still doing everything it can to meet the material needs of the masses of people, the real needs. You have a country now where 40% of the children are food insecure, and a number are starving. We're going to move on that. That's a priority. It's a priority to meet these needs and lift the bottom up as we do so. But there's not going to be the gorging, the trying to fill up empty lives with stuff that's not needed, that's not meaningful. And instead what there'll be, you're making, in one sense, you're getting less, but you're getting much more from this revolution. People around the world, but including in this country as well, the creativity that now is suppressed, the feeling for humanity that now is suppressed, the ability to live and function communally in a society that now people are divided into little atoms, constantly competing with each other. All that is no more. And instead you have people working together to overcome the scars of the past, to forge a different relationship with each other and with the web of life itself, to repair the damage that's being done to the environment by exactly this parasitical style of life that's been promoted and held in front of people as what to strive for, as if human beings are just mice in a maze chasing cheese. This is a society where people can be really human. And it'll be a fight, because there'll be people who want to go back to the old way, okay? There'll be people who say, well, I want my stuff. And the important thing, or one of the important things about this Constitution, and it's contained in what you read, is that there's an unprecedented robustness of debate. There's an unprecedented role for dissent, for diversity of opinion, for elections that are meaningful, and for participation in the running of society under the leadership, yes, of the vanguard, who does have the whole world in mind. All this is it's part of what makes this such an unprecedented and amazing document, and something people need to get into. We're confident that on this basis, we can win that struggle. It's going to be wild and woolly, and it's going to be hard, and we're going to learn a lot of new things and have to learn a lot of new things, we and those who come after us. But we think that this Constitution, which is based on an understanding of what's gone on in the past, where they've made tremendous advances and where they've run into obstacles and been unable to solve it, this holds the key. It is the blueprint, as you said at the beginning, the blueprint and the vision of a whole new world.
Well, Lenny, I'm so glad that you came on the Revolution Nothing Less show. Thanks for coming and talking with us about this.
Well, it's been more than my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me. And I just want to ask the audience again, remind you, go to revcom.us in the morning and get filled in, get the bigger. Your appetite has been whetted by what these folks here have done today. And I think this is a further step in that.
All right, well, we're going to have you back, and I want to echo that. Go to revcom.us in the morning and dig further into this Constitution. This is a real hope for humanity, and we need to dig into it and get it all over the place.
So with that, episode 10 of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show is coming to a conclusion. And once again, you know, this has been a show about if you can conceive a world without America, without everything it stands for and everything it does in the world. You've taken a great step to get a glimpse of a whole new world. And we went into this question of internationalism. And I'm obviously not going to repeat all that was said in this show, but I do want to say that at the end of how we began the show, Bob Avakian poses the question that if you've raised your sights to a world free of exploitation and oppression, how could you not feel compelled to take an active part in the world historic struggle to realize this? And why would you want to lower your sights to anything less? So I hope this show has inspired you to go deeper into the question of internationalism and why it is that the whole world comes first, to get deeper into Bob Avakian, and to go to revcom.us, and especially to promote this show far and wide. And with that, I want to turn this over to Sansara Taylor. I want to thank you for watching. My name is Andy Z, and we'll see you next week.
All right, well, I want to echo you, Andy, and thank you for joining us. If it's your first time or you're a return viewer, thanks for joining us for episode 10 of the Revolution Nothing Less show. If you learned something, if you were provoked, if you disagree with something, if you have a question, leave a comment in the comments below. Let us know what you're thinking. Remember to subscribe to the RevCom's channel below this video, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you know about each new upload every Thursday. Also, we want to ask you to join us in spreading this show. Tell people you know. Talk with them about the ideas you learned here today, and tell them about this show. Spread it on social media. Tell your friends, your family, your loved ones, others. And final thing I want to ask you to do is to become a patron. Become a supporter of this show. go to our page on patreon.com/therevcoms. This is where you can sign up to make a monthly donation for whatever level fits your budget. Give as much as you can. Help support this show. Help fuel it and get it out to the world. Join a community that's making that real. It's one of the ways to step into this revolution. So with that, we will see you next week. Revolution, nothing less.
I cannot breathe. Don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I can't breathe. These are the last words of George Floyd as he grasped for air, grunted in pain with the knee of a Minneapolis pig driven in his neck while he was face down in the street, in front of a crowd of people who looked on, horrified, begging this cop not to murder George Floyd. All of this caught on video. All of it went on for almost 10 minutes that we could see. We could go on and on about how sickening and outrageous this modern day lynching by this cop was. But how many bodies have to pile up? How many times does the cold-blooded nature of this system have to be thrown in our face? Almost 6 years after Eric Garner was choked out on camera, crying out 11 times, "I can't breathe." After all the blood and tears that have been shed. After all the investigations and non-investigations and cover-ups. After all the prayers and promises. None of this has stopped or even been slowed down. And none of this will be ended until we end this system through revolution, nothing less. Bob Avakian has said, and these words need to be posted on every wall and echo in every corner of society until people confront this reality. But Bob Avakian has said that the role of the police is not to serve and protect the people. It is to serve and protect the system that rules over the people. To enforce the relations of exploitation and oppression, the conditions of poverty, misery, and degradation into which the system has cast people and is determined to keep people in. The law and order the police are about, with all their brutality and murder, is a law and order that enforces all this madness. There is hope for a better world, but not without struggle. A real revolution is possible, and there is leadership for such a revolution in Bob Avakian. The revolution clubs and the National Get Organized for an Actual Revolution tour are going to work to organize forces for this revolution. The sparks of protest against the murder of George Floyd and against the recent wave of terror targeting black people at the hands of police and white supremacist thugs are all righteous and need to be spread and become more powerful. But everyone who is sick of watching video after video of this kind of murder, everyone who is tired of praying on our knees for change that never comes, and everyone who is ready to get onto the difficult road of making an actual revolution that really could put an end to this system needs to become an active and conscious follower of Bob Avakian and go to work with the revolution to prepare for the time when millions can be led to go all out to bring this system down and to replace it with a society that would be based on the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic in North America, which has been authored by BA. To end, again, BA poses this straight up. We have two choices. Either we live with all this and condemn future generations to the same or worse if they have a future at all, or make revolution.